Hi, Arpit. Welcome back. How are you?
Hey Jan, doing well. Season 2, episode 2 for us.
Indeed, indeed. We're back at this time towards the fag end of Border Gavaskar, but also what seems like many other test matches going on, along with the usual bevy of 2020 tournaments.
Of course, test matches and test match season is always fun to be around before we get into the more shorter form of cricket where when IPL takes over.
Absolutely. So, but the last time we spoke was just before Border Gavaskar started. We're now at the fag end. So, fourth test. Today is day four. So, what's been your take on the series so far?
Jan, first of all, I think given our editing record, this probably goes out after the IPL is also over. But I think Border Gavaskar Trophy has partially lived up to its hype. I think the first two tests were just spun away, pun intended, that we just
Yeah.
didn't have time to absorb it. I think
Yeah.
Harsha Bhogle on air mentioned that when the fourth test started, or I think day one or day two, that was literally the seventh effective day of test match cricket that was being played when three
Yeah.
test matches were over and you should have been on day 16 effectively. So it felt pretty short. We haven't had so much action. So I've been left craving for more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at the end of the day, India versus Australia are two of the best test teams in the world. So you are getting to see the best test cricket as you can. So have enjoyed it so far. How about you?
Yeah, no, I realized we should just stop doing any predictions or previews. If someone had told me there would be no Pat Cummins, no David Warner, Ashton Agar would be back home at this point, like Josh Hazelwood would have been back home, not playing a single test match, and we would have had Nathan Lyon, Todd Murphy, and a guy called Anthony, leading the spin ranks for Australia. I thought you would be bad. So we should just stop doing predictions and previews and just enjoy the action. On a serious note, I really enjoyed it. I think obviously the pitches have come in for a lot of questioning and a lot of discussion, but I think the quality of cricket has been pretty good, and I'm been really impressed with the bowling obviously, but also some of the quality of batting that we've seen through the series despite the low scores. And of course, Ahmedabad so far has been a happy outlier to the first three tests.
Yeah, so let's not wait for it. Let's get into the meat of it. So the biggest discussion around this test series has been about the pitches. So we always knew this is going to be a spin-friendly
Yep.
wicket. There's no surprises there. We also knew that it will not have as much assistance to fast bowlers. Sometimes you can have pitches that can be assisting to fast bowlers in the beginning and then become spin-friendly, but we knew that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
But we probably, as the Indian ecosystem of cricket, has chosen a far more extreme scenario where the third ball of the day pitches and takes away some part of the pitch with it. We've heard so many opinions that this is not cool. India should not be doing this. This is not fair contest between bat and ball. Where are you on this?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, just taking a bit of a step back, it is true that in the last, 3 or 4 years, home teams have had somewhat one-sided series they've played, right? And I think that is one of the, fallouts of having the World Test Championship, because every test match, whether or not the series is live or not, matters. And so teams are just going about maximizing home advantage in whatever way they can. So we have to acknowledge that while the World Test Championship was created to give relevance to each and every test match and each and every series, regardless of what the scoreline is, it also means that teams are going to try and maximize the amount of points that they can get. And you can argue that someone like a Sri Lanka are still in the running, and they've done equally well at home, and they've been a formidable force at home. So that, I think, is point one. Point two is I do think that around the world conditions matter, and we've had a couple of our pitch rapport episodes talking about how cricket is such a unique game where conditions matter so much, the weather matters so much, the pitch matters so much, and so on. And so, I only think it's fair that we see diversity in terms of, the kind of pitches we get as well. You know what to expect when you go to Australia. We know what to expect when you go to South Africa. We know what to expect when we go to England. So therefore, we should have characteristics that make up India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, also reflected in the kind of pitches that are produced. And then finally, I mean, I don't think we should ignore the work that the fast bowlers are doing, right? So, for example, in the first test match, within the first 2 overs, the first 2 wickets were taken by the two Indian fast bowlers, Mohammad Shami and Mohammad Siraj,
That's right.
and two quality test match dismissals, right? Khwaja, LBW, second ball, David Warner, off stump peg back, classic fast bowlers dismissal. So we shouldn't ignore the fact that, fast bowlers can thrive and they can do a good job. Yes, their role might be more limited compared to England, but we say the same thing about spinners in England or in some parts of South Africa, where we say they just come in to fill in a few overs in the middle. In India, the Indian seamers have clearly shown that they can do a good job. So we should acknowledge that as well. So according to me, it's all a fallout of being more results oriented. Do we want 3-day test matches? Probably not, and we can get into that. But equally, I do think conditions do need to reflect the ground and the country that you're playing in.
Yeah, so I think I partially agree with you where yes, conditions should favor the home side and even more so given the World Test Championship. But I don't see a world in the past where India was not spin friendly. India was home friendly. India has been pretty much a fortress for our cricket team for a long, long time. I don't remember us losing a series in the last 8-10 years. So we have been a fortress for a large part. But what we're seeing right now is these super spin friendly pitches. I have major concerns with them. A couple of reasons, right? One is you cannot keep saying that there is a ball which has a name on it. So you kind of go play aggressive cricket because you don't know when you'll get like this really scorcher of a ball in your gone. That's not how Test cricket should be. Everyone has a different style of play. Test cricket is welcoming to a Rishabh Pant, and so is it to a Pujara. You can't ask Pujara to play Pant's game just because there's a ball with his name written on it. That's my first issue, right? Which is it is forcing years of test match development in a batsman or a batter to play very differently now. So that's kind of the first issue I have. The second issue that I take away with this is if you want it to be home friendly, when you make it this spin friendly, you have almost negated the advantage that India's spin bowling actually has. So if you actually have Ashwin, Jadeja, and Akbar, who probably are like premier spinners in the world right now, they should be outperforming Nathan Lyon, Todd Murphy on every track they play on. And we're seeing Ashwin do that in Ahmedabad very clearly. So when you have a premium skill set, if you do not make the surface to assist as much, that delta shows up much more per se. But if you make the surface give so much assistance, there is hardly any incremental value that a premium bowler can provide. And that's why I keep saying this for test matches and one days, where for test matches, India's bowling has a premium skill set which needs to be given that to showcase. Similarly, in one day, you cannot be making flat batting tracks because India's batting advantage, again, because of a batting track which is flat, India's batting advantage does not show as much. So you'll see India will easily win those 250, 260 odd one-day games, but they will really have to contest for the games where there's 350 and 360 on the board. And the third is just for test match legacy and long-term test match cricket. The idea is test matches are won when you win 7 sessions. There are 15 sessions in a test match. You win a test match when there are 6 to 7 sessions. If you win 3 to 4, you could still lose a test match. And that is what makes test match special because it can flip over the period of 5 days. But in India, when you have only 2 days or 3 days, you win a test match by just winning 3 sessions. Because the 1 or 2 sessions you win are almost game changing. You'll have the more often 36 all out sessions where the game is over. You can not come back from that point, but that will never happen in a test match which is 15 session long. So those are kind of my 3 reasons why I feel India has gone way too extreme, and it actually does us more harm than good.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very interesting take. It actually made me think about why we are in the situation that we are, particularly with this series, right? So interestingly, Rahul Dravid's first test match as India coach was this match between India and New Zealand in Kanpur, right? And New Zealand had to bat out the last day to draw the test match. And India had taken the 9th wicket with 12 overs to go in the day. And the 10th wicket basically blocked out the 12 overs, and that match ended up being a draw. Now, India had won that match and all the other results had gone as per, what had happened. Coming into this series, we would have already been in a position where we would have qualified. So because we came into the series with this need to have to win at least 3 test matches outright. I think it also influenced the way that the pitches were created. But in a way, you've almost equalized it, because even an average spinner, quote unquote, and no disrespect to Lyon, Murphy, or Kuhneman, could maybe become closer in terms of their output. Whether their skill is the same or not is something to be debated. So it's funny how something that happened two years ago, and those 12 overs where India couldn't take that final wicket, may have resulted in what's happening today. But I certainly agree with you. A test match is meant to be played over 5 days. It's meant to see some seesaws. We saw it to some extent in Delhi, for example. India were 7 down. The match could have been on a knife edge, but then within a matter of one session, it turned. On day 3, the first session, basically Australia collapsed and the match was over. You don't want to see that. You do still want to see hard fought test matches. For example, with the Ahmedabad match, you never know. I mean, it may well peter out to be a draw, but it may also happen that in one session, Australia gains the upper hand, or India comes back after taking a lead in the first inning. So you do want to see that contest happening over 5 days' time. So I think that debate will go on. The good thing is, whichever two teams make it to the World Test Championship final, it is a neutral venue. It is over 6 days, so hopefully we don't need 6 days, but hopefully we get to see a good contest over 5 days. But I do think this debate over pitches will rage on, and till we have a format like this, which rewards percentage points and so on, teams may still want to take as much advantage, quote unquote, as possible, and skew the conditions in their favor. I certainly hope they don't water one side of the pitch and do those kind of things. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's kind of the diversity I want to see in Test cricket.
Interesting. And when I was discussing the same point with another friend of mine, he brought up a very interesting test match. He always uses the example of Karun Nair's 300 test match, the one where he scored 300.
Yes.
Because that's a classic example where England actually made 400 odd runs in India. And it was Karun Nair's batting proficiency that came out. India scored 750 odd, and then India went on to, I think, win by an innings, if I'm not wrong.
We did. That's
yeah.
Right.
So it shows that the pitches were friendly for Indian batsmen and Indian spinners, but England as a team did not feel like they're completely out of it. They did end up making 400 on that wicket.
Absolutely. I mean, and look, the same thing that probably happened in the last Test series that India lost, right? It was against England. The pitches were competitive. They weren't like ranked turners, right? And England spinners were just better. They just showed more skill than India. Panesar and Graham Swan just showed better skill than the likes of Oja and Harbhajan at that time. So, we have to give credit where credit is due. And so pitches which allow, the bowlers and batsmen to bring out their skills naturally better do make for better Test cricket. It's just that with this final on the line, I think we may have tilted it a little bit too much in one.
I think while we're on BTT, I would love your thoughts. I'm not sure how accurate I read these reports, but the report said that India pretty much did not reveal what the pitch was to the Australian team. There were almost 2 pitches prepared until the final day, almost of equal preparation overall. One with being very spin friendly and very similar to the first 2 tests, and one the actual surface we're seeing. Was that true? What do you think that the goal is? How does that play out?
Yeah, look, I mean, what I read was 2 days to go to the test match. There were, at least in Ahmedabad, there were 2 pitches that were prepared, that had rollers, that had been watered. One was much greener, the other was much drier, and both were made to look like there was a chance that either of them could be used. And Steve Smith and Australia were curious because it's never happened that 2 days to go before a test match, you don't know what the actual playing surface is. Now, you may still leave some grass on the surface and then cut it off on the day before, but it's never, at least in Steve Smith said that in his entire Test career, he'd never seen that. But the clue for the Australian team was what happened after they left the ground and the Indian team were practicing, where both Rahul Dravid and Rohit Sharma asked for one particular pitch to be uncovered and saw and then covered it back up again. So I think, again, in India, and then the other thing that happened was then the broadcasting crew started to install their broadcasting cameras on either end. And then once you saw where the cameras were placed, it then gave you an idea that, okay, this is the pitch that's going to be used, which ended up being, as expected, the drier of the 2 pitches. The greener pitch was basically, after that point, not considered to be for the test match. So again, you can call it mind games, you can call it, taking every single advantage.
I'm not one to complain. I was just curious how it played out. But does that impact, in your opinion, did it impact the way Australia picked its team? Because clearly, given the way the surface is played out, at least we don't know what the result will be, but at this point, I do feel Australia is a bowler shot.
Yeah.
Their fifth bowler is Cameron Green. They're
Yes.
playing three spinners on a not so spin friendly track. While we had two legitimate seams bowlers in form of Umesh and Shami. Do you think that the pitch influenced it, or Australia would have gone with this 11 irrespective?
It's interesting because for about 80 overs yesterday, Australia's pace bowlers were going at 4 runs and over. The spinners were going at 2 runs and over. And India overall was at about just under 3 runs and over in terms of run rate. So the spinners were giving Australia a lot of control. And secondly, Australia had Cameron Green, who had given them 114 runs as a batsman. So for them to bring in a Scott Boland to exert even more control, yes, that would have helped, but that would have meant that their batting lineup would have been severely impacted as well. So it is hard. I doubt Australia would have made a change even if they had seen the greener pitch. I do think that the three spinners gave them excellent control. They all had their moments when they troubled the batsman, and at the same time they made run scoring really hard. So I mean, yesterday was one of those days. It was a Saturday at home, and I could finally watch 3-4 hours of uninterrupted Test cricket. So I watched that very attritional second session and also the third session where India were barely going at 3 and over, and I think all three spinners did the job that they were supposed to. So I doubt Australia would have had a change of lineup, and yes, they would have obviously loved to have another seam bowling option, but the spinners are doing the job, and so far they've kept India to under 300 after bowling almost 100 overs. So they've kept themselves in the match despite not taking more wickets than they probably wanted to.
One thing that came to my mind is when you said I had a chance to see Test cricket for 3 to 4 hours uninterrupted. Is my habit is because you're in the US, you probably can see one session, max 1.5 session, and then you have to go to bed. My tendency is to wake up the next morning and watch highlights of Test match cricket. And I have to say, it nowhere replicates the experience of watching a Test match. Right? There's like T20 one day can be shown well in highlights. Test match cannot be, and that got me thinking: is what is the right way to show a Test match highlight? Because right now, highlights refers to wicket, boundaries, and pretty much any oohs and ah moments like drop catches, etc. What's the right way if you had to recreate a highlights package for a Test match, a single day of Test match? How would you go about it?
Yeah, it's so cool. I actually had the same thought yesterday when I was watching because we had Cheteshwar Pujara who made I think 40 runs of 122 deliveries, and at one point he was like 30 runs of 95 deliveries, and they started showing a highlights package of Pujara, and Pujara had hit 2 boundaries. That's it, right? And so they were just showing him like nudging the ball and nurdling the ball for 2s and 3s. But for me, that's not the highlights of the Pujara innings. Pujara innings is about how does he get to the pitch of the ball to a spinner? How does he dead bat it? He has that little hop and tries to smother the spin. He tries to meet the ball as close to after it has pitched as possible. With the fast bowlers, you see that his head is exactly over the ball when he's forward defending. Mitchell Starc was starting to reverse the ball in the second session. How Pujara started to play closer to his body. So for me, those are probably the passages of play that you would want to talk about. And for me, the highlights would be how would you narrate the story of the day rather than, to your point, showing boundaries and sixes. And for me, even the way Australia's field settings were changing, and Steve Smith, especially in the second and the third session, was extremely creative with the way he was changing his fields. In fact, 2 times an over, he would sometimes change the field. It was clear he was doing it sometimes with the bowler's consent. Sometimes he was doing it without asking the bowler, just putting 2 covers, putting 2 mid wickets, putting a super straight, almost a straight long on right next to the non-striker when Shubman Gill was batting. So I think those are the things which probably for me make up highlights in a Test match rather than watching the boundaries and sixes. And same way for the bowlers as well. You love to see how bowlers are gripping and releasing the ball, the angles at which they are delivering. When you see likes of an Ashwin bowling, even Mitchell Starc yesterday, Mitchell Starc at one point started bowling cross seam and he saw that reverse swing had gone away. So he was trying to put more slower balls. He was trying to pitch the ball such a way that he could see what the pitch could do in terms of taking some swing off the pitch. So those kind of things I think would make for a much more interesting set of highlights. I think some of the more hardcore cricket fans would want to. What's your take on highlights?
I completely agree. I mean, I literally that, and I don't think it's too hard to do, and I don't think it's too bad an idea. I hope someone's listening and actually executes. As you said, it's about putting together a narrative of what happened during the day and the phases of play and who was on top and what did they try to do to get to keep the advantage. The only other thing to add on is I would love to see, when you said about field placements, is generally there's a plan in place, which is I'm going to be bowling short or I'm going to be bowling full. And at what point of the day that was done, for example, when Mitch Starc came in fresh, you obviously want a fast bowler to bowl short early in his spell. When he's not tired, he can put in a lot more. And at that point, I think Shubman Gill was given a deep fine leg, a deep square leg, and a regular square leg. And Shubman Gill, knowing where the ball is coming, began to step outside his leg stump and squatting the ball down on the off because there was just one fielder there. That for me was absolutely brilliant to see that what's the bowler planning, what's the captain planning, and how is the batsman countering it. And it may not result in boundaries, but that's what I want to see as Test match highlights.
Yeah, indeed. And that's what I mean. I mean, the dispatches are not about runs scored or wickets taken. It's about these passages of play where it's this cat and mouse between the batting side and the fielding side. And it was fascinating that second session for me to watch, especially Shubman Gill and Pujara navigate, and to see Steven Smith trying absolutely everything in those conditions and in the searing heat. Just reminded me of times when I was younger and used to watching 6 hours of Test cricket in a day.
That's awesome. What do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got a few minutes. I've been watching this last week or so has been the WPL. Obviously, a seminal moment for world cricket, if not Indian cricket. So, curious to see if you've been following it at all. If you had any thoughts based on what you've seen so far and how you expect the tournament to pan out.
For me, yeah, I think similar. It's probably a pretty pivotal moment in women's cricket to have a women's IPL. I have just been following scores, haven't watched matches overall. For the one thing I'm feeling a lack of is team chemistry to come through, because I guess one of the things you'll see in men's cricket is they are fairly used to leaving their regular national team setup and going and playing with other sort of team members across the world. Team. I think women are still getting used to that, where they might have a slightly different role than what they're regularly used to playing at. They might have to play with a different 10 members around them. And that's something I've seen a little getting used to. It's something about RCB being RCB. But the one impressive thing that I noticed is women's IPL is experimenting with letting batters and in fact fielders to challenge an umpire's call for no balls and wides. And it's fascinating because we've seen almost wanting his team to come back in the middle of the T20 innings because a no ball was not called his way. What do you think is the impact of this? How do you think this will play out going forward?
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember you pointed this out, during the week when we were exchanging messages, and, that was one of the games that I actually hadn't watched the highlights of. And then I went back and watched it. It was the first game where the chasing team actually successfully chased the target. And it was because in the last over, they needed, I think, 8 of 3. And then they thought it was a dot ball and it ended up becoming 7 of 3 or 6 of 3. And then, because they asked for a DRS for the wide call and they got the wide. And then the chasing team ended up winning the match. So I think it is an interesting development. I've always wondered, why is it only dismissals that you can go to the DRS system for? It also means it makes the game a little bit slower, which I don't like, because especially in the moment you want to make sure that you have the momentum going and the game flow not being interrupted. And it also makes the game a little bit more mechanical. So it takes away some of that discretion that the umpire has, where they think maybe the batsman has moved a bit close to the delivery, and so that has to be taken into account and not just the tram line. So it takes out a bit of that judgment and that unknown factor. But finally, if it also means that you don't have the likes of a team captain running on and insisting that the team comes away. I remember MS Dhoni once also did that in one of the final overs in one of the IPL games, same as what Rishabh Pant did. If it means that teams keep to that spirit of cricket a bit more, I think it can only be a good thing, because the stakes are so high nowadays that matches should not be decided over such fine margins. So I think it's going to be interesting. I'd love to see how it pans out.
Yeah, I welcome this change, to be honest, with you on the point that why should dismissals only be as part of review system. It's a decision review system, and all decisions should come under it. And I'm not as worried about the game lengthening per se, because at the end of the day, the number of reviews are finite. So you use them for your wickets or you use them for your wides. That's for you to manage strategically. Yes, but as long as the number of reviews don't go up, I am in favor. But I agree with you that when the last overs get tight, we'll end up seeing a lot more reviews get used up towards the end, and it almost becomes like those NBA games you see where they keep calling timeouts and frustrating the audience, the opposition, because of break in play, and that's not something I'd want to see in cricket.
Yeah, no, it should be really interesting. But I think, as you said, it's been a surprisingly high scoring tournament so far. That's been one of my takeaways. There have been, I think, 200 plus scores scored so far. I think it's like a record for any 2020 tournament. There have been some amazing individual performances, and you're right. While all these teams have come together very, very recently, but it still shows that sometimes just having a group of stars doesn't mean you're going to get the best results. RCB being the example right now, where they're unfortunately struggling a lot, but it's still impressive to see all of the top stars playing, and hopefully we get to see a good finish. And I also like that, at least for this year, that the matches are all in two venues, so they're all happening in Mumbai. So teams are not traveling around and so on. I know people in Bombay are quite excited about it, and a lot of people are going to the games. So it creates that little bit of momentum and that excitement within the city. So more power to the tournament, and hopefully this is the first of much better things to come.
Yep.
Great. Look, on that note, good luck to India for the rest of the 2 days, and hopefully this means we are successfully through to the men's team. I mean, is successfully through to the Border Gavaskar, makes it 3-1 in Border Gavaskar and goes through to the final. We shall come back and analyze whatever happens both here and also in the other series that are going on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. Fun talking.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.